My brother went straight to our parents and said, "She's just a woman, give the business to me," and they actually listened, cutting me out entirely. I was devastated, but then the lawyer grinned and said, "Your grandfather left you something special." When my brother saw it, his smug expression vanished. I never imagined my own family would betray me, but when wealth and power are involved, blood means nothing. Let me take you back to the start. I grew up in a family where the business was everything. My grandfather had built a small manufacturing company from the ground up in the 1950s. It began with a modest workshop and eventually expanded into a mid-sized operation with statewide contracts. It wasn't a global empire, but it gave us a good life. After my grandfather retired, my dad and uncle took over, with the expectation that the next generation would step in. My older brother Nick and I were groomed for it. I adored the company. I spent every summer in the office, learning about logistics, payroll, and operations. By the time I was 25, I knew the business inside and out. Nick, on the other hand, barely paid attention. He viewed the company as his inheritance, but he had no interest in doing the work. He partied through college, scraped by with a business degree, and came back only to sit in a few meetings before heading out to play golf or hang out with his friends. Despite everything, I thought when the time came, my parents would be fair. I was wrong. The betrayal. A few months before my grandfather passed away, my parents called for a family meeting. I remember sitting in the dining room, already uneasy, as Nick wore this smug, self-satisfied grin. My dad cleared his throat and said, "We've decided that Nick will take over the company when we retire." I couldn't believe my ears. "What?" I asked, glancing between them. "What about me?" My mom, in a condescending tone, patted my head as if I were a child. "Sweetheart, you'll still be involved, but you'll be supporting your brother." I had worked tirelessly for years, and they expected me to simply stand by while Nick ran the company into the ground. Nick leaned back in his chair, grinning. "Come on, sis, it's not personal, it makes sense. I'm the oldest son, so I'll be the face of the company. You can handle the details. You know, the stuff women are good at." I saw red. I turned to my dad, hoping he'd correct him, but he just nodded. I looked at my mom, who smiled as if she had given me a great gift. "You'll still get a good salary, dear. You won't be left out." I pushed my chair back. "I can't believe this." "Don't be dramatic," Nick said. "It's just business." Just business? That night, I cried like I had never before. Not only because of the company, but because I finally realized the truth. No matter how hard I worked, I would always be seen as just the daughter. So, I made a decision. I was done. The next morning, I walked into my dad's office and quit. "You're overreacting," he said, shaking his head. "No," I replied, "I'm just finally seeing things clearly," and I left. I started job hunting, but it was tough. My entire career had been tied to the family business, and while I had loads of experience, I lacked connections outside of it. I struggled, but I wasn't going to crawl back. Then everything changed. The will. A few months later, my grandfather passed away. It was a huge loss. I had been very close to him, and unlike my parents, he always believed in me. After the funeral, we all gathered in a lawyer's office for the reading of the will. My parents weren't concerned. My grandfather had sold most of his assets years ago, so they expected everything to pass to them. The lawyer went through the usual items, some charitable donations and a few mementos for old friends. Then, he got to me. "To my granddaughter," the lawyer read, "I leave something I know she will appreciate." I raised an eyebrow. I wasn't expecting anything, but then the lawyer pulled out a new folder. "This," he said, sliding it toward me, "is a separate trust. Your grandfather left you full ownership of his original workshop, the one where he started the company." My dad straightened up. "What?" The lawyer continued. "The land, the building, everything inside it, it's all yours." I blinked. I didn't know my grandfather still owned it. He had moved the company to a larger facility decades ago, and I thought the old workshop had been sold. But no, he kept it, and now it was mine. Nick chuckled. "Great, she gets an old warehouse. Meanwhile, I'm running a real company." The lawyer smiled. "There's one more thing." He pulled out another document. "Along with the property, your grandfather also left you all of his original patents." Nick's smirk disappeared. "You see, our grandfather had invented several crucial manufacturing processes still used by the company. He never sold the rights, just licensed them, which meant I now owned them." I looked at the papers in front of me. The patents weren't just valuable, they were essential. Our family business couldn't function without them. Nick turned to my dad. "Fix this," he hissed. But there was nothing they could do. My grandfather had outsmarted them, and now it was my turn to take control. Nick was pale. My dad's mouth opened and closed. My mom gripped her purse tightly. I sat back in my chair, calmly resting my fingers on the folder of documents. This wasn't just about getting back at my brother. It was my chance to turn things around. The lawyer cleared his throat. If there are no further questions, that concludes the reading of the will. Nick snapped. This is. He turned to my dad. Do something. You can challenge the will, right? The lawyer gave him a pitying smile. Your grandfather's legal team made sure everything was airtight. There's no room for a challenge. My father clenched his jaw. He wasn't used to losing. My mother tried another approach. She reached across the table and put her hand on mine. Honey, she said, her voice sugary sweet, why don't we be reasonable? That workshop has no real value to you. It's just an old building. Why don't you sign it over to your brother? We'll make it fair. Fair? Like how it was fair when they gave the company to Nick without question? Like how they saw me as nothing more than his assistant? I looked at her hand on mine. Slowly, I pulled away. No. She blinked, taken aback. What? No, I repeated firmly. Nick scoffed. Don't be a brat. You don't even know what to do with patents. I smiled. Maybe, but you do. And that was the problem. The power shift. I walked out of that meeting with my head held high, but the real battle was just beginning. I needed a plan. First, I met with a patent attorney. What I had was pure gold. The patents my grandfather left me were vital. Without them, the business couldn't function. The contract allowing my father's company to use the patents was set to expire in 6 months, and I wasn't renewing it. Nick and my father must have realized this, because 2 weeks later, I got a call. Let's be practical, my dad said, his voice strained. Why don't we buy you out? We'll make a generous offer. How generous? I asked. There was a pause, then he named an amount. It was laughable. They were trying to lowball me, hoping I'd panic. No thanks, I replied, and hung up. 2 days later, Nick showed up at my apartment. He was furious. Are you out of your damn mind? He yelled. You're wrecking the company because of some petty grudge? I folded my arms and looked at him. You mean the business you took from me? His face turned beet red. It was never yours. I raised an eyebrow. And yet, you need my patents to keep it running? His fists clenched. Fine, tell me what you want. I smirked. No. Nick's face twisted in confusion. What do you mean? No? I mean I'm not selling. I'm keeping them. His eyes widened, a flicker of realization flashing across his face. For the first time in his life, he understood he wasn't in control anymore. And as for me, I was just getting started. The collapse. Months went by, and I watched the company implode from a distance. My dad attempted to negotiate with new suppliers, but none could replicate the patented process that my grandfather invented. Orders fell through, clients withdrew, and investors got jittery. Then came the layoffs. Nick tried to mask the damage, but mass layoffs aren't something you can hide. Employees left, suppliers dropped out, and the company, our family's legacy, began to crumble. But I wasn't done. The final strike. Just months before my patents were set to expire, I took action. I reopened my grandfather's old workshop. I secured a loan, hired ex-employees who had been fired or mistreated by Nick and my dad, and launched my own business. And here's the kicker. I licensed my grandfather's patents to my own company. That meant if any of my father's clients wanted to keep using those processes, they'd have to come to me, and they did. By the time the patent deadline hit, my father's company was on its last legs. Nick called me, practically begging. Please, he said, we'll pay anything. I let the silence stretch out. Then I said, no, and this time, I meant it. I was the one in control. I thought that would be the end of it. My company was thriving, my grandfather's legacy was secure, and my brother was finally paying for his arrogance. But I should have known better than to think Nick would quit. The desperate move. About a year later, I got a call from one of my clients. You need to see this, he said, sending me a link. I opened it, and my stomach sank. Nick had started a new company, but not just any company. He was selling a product that was eerily similar to the very processes my grandfather patented. A chill ran down my spine. Did he think he could fool me? The stolen technology. I hired a specialist to investigate. And sure enough, Nick had stolen confidential data from my company. One of my trusted employees, someone I had brought over from my father's failing company, had been secretly working for Nick. This person had access to proprietary designs and formulas and had been feeding Nick everything. And now Nick was trying to undermine me with my own stolen technology. I was furious. The legal battle. Nick thought I would just let it slide. He was wrong. I filed a lawsuit so quickly it left him reeling. Patent infringement, intellectual property theft, corporate espionage. The evidence was undeniable: emails, documents traced to his IP address, and testimony from the employee who had flipped on him to save himself. Game over. The final nail. The judge didn't just rule in my favor, he obliterated Nick. All of his stolen products were pulled from the market immediately. He was ordered to pay millions in damages, and worst of all, he was banned from the industry for 10 years. Nick's new company was over before it had even started, and as for the traitorous employee, I made sure he was blacklisted. No one would ever trust him again. The fallout. Nick lost everything: his mansion, gone, his cars, repossessed, his reputation, destroyed. He ended up filing for bankruptcy, and the last I heard, he was working a low-level job at some no-name company. As for my parents, they begged me to forgive him. He's your brother, my mother pleaded. He made mistakes. I stared at her, unimpressed. No, I said firmly, he made choices, and I walked away. I owed them nothing, and I never looked back. True ending. Some people never learn. A few years later, I heard about Nick again. After failing in business, he jumped into the crypto and NFT world, but he scammed the wrong people. And let's just say they weren't as forgiving as I was. I thought Nick had finally learned his lesson, that after losing the company, the lawsuit, and filing for bankruptcy, he'd finally stay down. But some people just don't get it. A few years passed, and my business was flourishing. I expanded my grandfather's old workshop into a full-scale operation, hiring real talent and making innovations that Nick could never have imagined. We had exclusive contracts, a solid reputation, and best of all, I didn't have to deal with my family anymore. Then one day, I got a strange call from a business associate. "Hey," he said, "I just met with a guy named Nick. Claims he used to run a big company and has some game-changing ideas. Wants to find investors." My stomach churned. "What kind of ideas?" I asked. There was a pause. "He wants to start a new company, directly competing with yours." The last betrayal. I shouldn't have been surprised. Nick was like a cockroach. No matter how many times you knocked him down, he always found a way to crawl back. He was trying to revive himself with new investors who didn't know his past. Worse, he was lying about everything, presenting himself as a former business genius wronged by his vengeful sister. I was furious. I could have ignored it and let him fail again, but this time, I wanted to end him once and for all. The perfect setup. I made a few calls, pulled a few strings, and ended up becoming one of his investors. Not directly, of course. I had a business partner, Mr. Holloway, an older gentleman always looking for exciting ventures. He arranged a meeting with Nick, pretending to be interested in his new business idea. And Nick? He fell for it hook, line, and sinker. The sting. Nick walked in like he owned the place. He presented his shiny new business plan, complete with fake projections and a sob story about how his sister ruined his life. He even had the nerve to say, "She took everything from me. All I need is the right backers to take back what's mine." Mr. Holloway played along, pretending to be intrigued. Then he set the trap. "I like what I'm hearing," he said, "but before I commit, I need proof of concept. Show me what you've got." Nick panicked. He had nothing, no products, no patents, no working prototypes, so he did what he knew best: he stole. Caught red-handed, Nick rushed production on a product that was a blatant copy of my patented design. But we were ready. My legal team had already prepared. The moment Nick launched his first prototype, we nailed him with another lawsuit. This time, we didn't just go after him, we went after his investors, his suppliers, everyone. The investors pulled out, his suppliers dropped him, the media tore him apart, exposing him for the fraud he was. And just when he thought it couldn't get worse, I bought the lease to his office and had him evicted. The final collapse. Nick had nowhere to turn, no investors, no reputation, no money. He finally broke. I received one last email from him, a desperate plea: "Please, I have nothing left. I made mistakes. Just help me." I stared at the screen for a long time, then deleted the email. The true ending. Nick never recovered. The last I heard, he was waiting tables at a rundown restaurant. My parents, still trying to guilt me, claimed I had destroyed my own brother. I just smiled. No, he destroyed himself. And with that, I walked away. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. Thanks for watching. See you again in the next video. Stay stunned.